The thing that they are dealing is these things. What is philosophical approach? What are the tenets of philosophical approach? They are normative in its discipline. They are going by logics. They always discuss to be what ought to be in political science rather than what is. Next one is they are prescriptive in nature rather than being practical in nature. Prescriptive means they are suggestive. They always suggest that this has to be in this way. And they always raise normative issues based on justice, liberty, equality. Based on justice, liberty, equality. As a result, this as they are speaking justice, liberty, equality, they always see in the terms of ethics or philosophy. Hence, that is present. However, over a period of time, as they have made this as a sub-discipline of the so-called philosophical approach, political science was in a state of decline. Political science was in a state of decline over a period of time. This was revived only about recently by John Rawls' theory of justice. This is what we have discussed in my earlier class. John Rawls' theory of justice, it has started reviving, and because of this, the school survived over a period of time. Right? So this is what the normative approach or the philosophical approach is, because this is once they have asked this question, just have a quick look at it. The normative approach focuses on values and prescribes the preferences for a particular type of order as dictated by morality to achieve what ought to be, what should be, rather than what is. You write against this, rather than what is. I have already discussed this in my last class. The focuses on values. Ethics focuses on values. Philosophy focuses on values. For example, in the theory of justice, a normative approach defines what the meaning of justice is. But according to critics of the normative approach, morality can be subjective. So there can be more definitions of justice. So it is subject to a biased understanding. So this is subject to a biased understanding as per the critiques of normative approach. But normative approach always defines what justice is in terms of ethics. On the other hand, empirical approach. Empirical approach is scientific approach. It seeks to discover and describe facts. They are discussed about values, they are described about facts. It relies on observation through sensory experience to describe what is, what ought to be, then here what is. For example, empirical approach will give a detailed account of voting behavior in a particular election, but according to critics of the empirical approach, it only describes a particular phenomena. So the critics of empirical approach, they say that they are restricted only to particular phenomena and does not give any value judgment or plan of action. So this is about empirical approach. I will come later. Here they are comparing the so-called normative approach with empirical approach. According to Robert the Hull, in politics, not deciding is simply deciding to allow others to decide for you, which means not deciding will be a politics or will be a policy in the so-called empirical approach. They are not worried about values. As a result, whenever it comes to just a particular phenomena, they are not going to say which is going to play a very crucial role or which value is playing a crucial role. As a result, they don't decide. If you are not deciding anything in politics, you are allowing others to decide. Despite having pros and cons, both are important for the study of political science. That is what they have given as an introduction. But if you look at the significance of normative approach, this approach consists of criteria of selection of problems and relevant data according to V.V. Dyke and Isaiah Berlin. Isaiah Berlin defines the normative approach as, you have to remember this, discovery and application of moral notions in the sphere of political relations and practice. This is important. Isaac Berlin defines normative approach as the discovery and application of moral notions in the sphere of political relations and practice. Apply moral notions or ethical values to political science. That is what Isaac Berlin says as far as normative approach is. The normative approach is aimed at discovering what ought to be, that is, an ideal meaning of different political concepts. Different political concepts. It tends to express the preference for a particular type of order, dictated by moral principles, a sense of duty, etc., by focusing on intrinsic value of the desired action. Look at this. What I am saying, the entire thing is this. They are focused on values or ideals. They are norms. Norms means ethical values. They go by logics. They go by what ought to be. They are practical in nature. So if you are remembering five, the rest of the thing is the same thing written in a paragraph format. As seen in the works of Plato and Aristotle, normative theory is consistent critique and analysis of the existing state of affairs and a desire to maintain stable order or change it for a better ideal state. So what they are saying, they always go for an ideal state, right? Plato and Aristotle, when you study them, you'll understand how they have always strived to make the state an ideal state rather than a realistic state. So what are the things that you have to remember? You have to by heart it. As per Isaiah Berlin, normative approach is discovery and application of moral notions in the sphere of political relations and practice. And as per V.V. Dyke, normative As per Aisha Berlin, as per V.V. Dyke, it is an approach consisting of criteria of selection of problems and relevant data. Selection of problems and relevant data according to Dyke. What is an approach? This fellow has said what is an approach. And this fellow said what is normative approach. So you can always use V.V. Dyke in your answer writing saying that as per this fellow, approach consists of selection of problems and relevant data. That is called Dyke's issue of approach. Aisha Berlin's definition is this. Next, what are the advantages or significance of this? In a normative approach, it formulates minimum standard of ideas and norms. Maximum normative approach formulates ideal standards which no phenomena could achieve. So minimum, again they are saying that normative approach can be classified as minimalist normative approach or maximalist normative approach. In a minimum normative approach, minimum standards of ideas or norms are set, whereas in the maximum ideas, ideal state is set. So minimum standard of ideas, which means rather than going to the extreme ideas, you can go for minimum standard ideas, right? So if you are going for the ultimate thing, that is called the ideal standard or benchmark standard. It is somewhat above than the minimum standards. As a result, maximum standards are higher to achieve, hence they would be ideal in its nature. Maximum standards will be ideal in its nature. Example, by making ideas like justice, equality, and end in itself, the normative approach always strives to derive a perfect order of peace and prosperity. Without normative approach, society and political runs the risk of visionless, directionless, and conflicts that could end the very existence of these institutions. For example, today your politics are criminalized. Criminalization of politics has taken place. As a result, the state of political affairs in any country has been at a very dysfunctional or imperfect. As a result, without normative approach, without ethical approach, society and polity runs the risk of going directionless, and over a period of time, they could be a question on the very existence of these institutions. For example, what has happened in Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka, right? They have been went out of bounds because of morals has been not followed in their political dimension. Which morals have they have not followed? Ethic, economical morals. Economical morals has not been taken care. As a result, the very existence of the institution of politics was threatened in Sri Lanka. Right? That is the thing. Having said that, why they have criticized it? It has been criticized as value-based and subjective approach to inquiry. Also, scholars say that there cannot be any scientific validation. So, They are speaking about ideas, but they are not scientifically proved. So there is a higher debate on what is the ideal condition. So for Plato, one thing may be an ideal thing, but for Aristotle, one condition may be an ideal thing. So ideas always change from person to person, from situation to situation. Hence, ideas are subjective in its nature. So you cannot say exactly what is correct, what is wrong. Hence, they are subjective. As a result, it is not proven by facts. That is the huge criticism that this school has got. See, normative theories disagree on even fundamental concepts like rights, powers, justice, etc. So they had their own version, normative theories. One person will have one thing on rights, the other person will have other thing on rights. So this is how they differ. So what are the points that you have to write from here? There are two sets of normative approaches. This is very important. This is the highly significance of normative approach. The second paragraph you have to write, and criticism is here, right? Next, as a result, behavioral revolution was an attempt to take away political theory from age-old normative philosophical mold and give it more scientific and value-neutral outlook on facts and interdisciplinary approach. Look at this. This is what I said. Normative approach has been criticized by scientific approach. Scientific approach is known as behavioral approach. Behavioral approach has found out a new way to take away political science from normative discipline to more scientific and value neutral outlook. This is how they have got our criticism on normative approach. The best person in scientific approach is David Easton. He agreed that in his speech declaring the beginning of post behavioralism that values are essential in political studies. Now again, behavioral approach was given by David Easton. However, over a period of time, even behavioral approach was criticized and post-behavioralism has come, and even post-behavioralism was given by the same person called David Easton. Now David Easton understood that if you are just going on scientific analysis, theory is not going to work. As a result, you have to remember values along with scientific facts. This is what he has corrected at last. As a result, so David Winston agreed in his post behavioralism that values are essential to political studies. He subscribed to the credo of action and relevance, giving way to the resurgence of normative theories. So this is one thing that we have to always write. David Easton himself in his post-behavioral approach has given importance to action and relevance rather than scientific facts. It is very important. A credit should be given to action and relevance rather than just the so-called science. In recent times, resurgence of normative approach has been seen in Macpherson's view of democracy, Rawls' theory of justice, also in his writings of Dworkin, Amartya Sen. So they have written their democracy, justice. As a result, the theory has been seen in resurgence. What is Macpherson's theory of democracy? What is Rawls' theory of justice? I'll discuss this in that respective chapters of democracy and justice. Right? So for now, this is what the answer is. Hence, the normative approach is a significant part of political analysis which tries to arrive at a desirable political question. As important, Daryl Glacio, Daryl Glacio says, engagement with normative theory proceeds from the hope that moral actors who debate their options is open and self-conscious way will, on the whole, do fewer things most of us would consider bad than those who proceed unreflectively or suppress moral debate. So what is he saying? Engagement with normative theory proceeds from the hope that moral actors who debate their options in an open and self-conscious way will, on the whole, do fewer things of the most of us would consider bad than those who proceed unreflectively or suppress moral debate. What does this mean? He is saying that these thinkers are always considered about those morals always considered about morals which is subjected to open-end discussions. And whenever you are prescribing morals, they always do not satisfy with what the others are saying, but they give the idealistic means. And this will not be liked by many people because many people try to be unethical to suppress the debate, but still they go for idealistic measures. Telling lies is what many of us like, but they never say don't tell lies. They say always idealistic, always tell truth. So even if someone doesn't like what their theory is, they always stick to idealism. That is what this person has considered. As far as V.V. Dykes is considered, philosophical approach is concerned with clarification of concepts and aims at evolving standards of rights and wrongs. It is concerned with concepts of aims and rights, what is right and wrong. According to Stephen Wasby, philosophical approach takes in all aspects of man's political activities as its goal a statement of underlying principle concerning those activities. Always philosophical approach deals with political activities of man and what is the goals that they have to achieve. Examples of philosophical approach: Plato's Republic, Rawls' theory of justice. Despite the indispensable role of values in political theory, critics warn about the dangers of philosophical methods becoming highly imaginative, utopian. Utopian means idealist in the case. Also, this approach is criticized for being biased, unrealistic for its oversimplified assumptions. So, what is the point that I wanted to say by all this is you just need to remember, no need to remember this much, you just need to remember this slide. What is philosophical approach? It is a political science was considered as a subdiscipline of philosophy. As a result, they deal with ethics, right? What is right and wrong, rather than they are not focused on scientific, rather than focused on the norms. As a result, normative approach is more or less similar to philosophical approach. The exponents of this philosophical approach are this one you have to write. After this, what you have to write? What are the features of this? This is the third point, right? The fourth point is criticism. Criticism has come from mainly behavioral approach. How the present day discipline has evolved, though behavioral approach has criticized this field, again the same person has applauded this school, saying that values are essential in a political life. That is, David Easton himself said in his post behavioral approach. So the subject has revived because of John Rawls and Macpherson's view of democracy, both. Hence, today philosophy is playing a very crucial role in political science. So today normative approach is playing a very crucial role in political science. That is what you can write as far as this school is considered. I hope you got an understanding. The rest of the things is I have just given some notes for this, how to write the answer. Only this tab, this slide you have to remember. The rest of the things are derived from that itself. So in order to add some values or to add some commentators, what you have to write? You have to add the commentator of the so-called Aisha Berlin. You remember this because this should be written. So you write this under separate heading or you write this under separate notes. Okay. So that is the only one thing that you have to remember. Next one is David Easton. This is the third point that you have to remember. The rest of the story you can write. Dairy Glacier, if you can remember, you remember. Otherwise, no problem. Now remember this V.V. Dykes concept of philosophical approach because a very simple thing to remember. Next, Stephen Wasby definition of philosophical approach. They have defined what is philosophical approach. That's it. So this is about the first approach of philosophical approach. Is it clear? Confusing గా ఉందా ఏమన్నా ఎవరికైనా? Is there anyone who felt that it is a bit confusing? If it is confusing, stick on to the slide that I have written yesterday. Clear. Let's go to second approach, historical approach. Historical approach. Now, what is this historical approach about? Again, we'll go with the same theme. What is this historical approach? Now, there has always been a perception that politics is closely related with history. So there has been always a perception that politics is closely related to history. Why? It is held that politics is present history and history is past politics. See this. So whenever what people consider is politics is nothing but history. They say that if you study history, say for example, if you are studying Mauryan history, if you are studying Guptan history, what you'll study? We'll study how the political life was there. Either that may be how the rulers have ruled it, what is the famous contribution for art and architecture, what is their social conditions, everything is history is nothing but the political life at that point of time, how those institutions are organized. So they say that politics is nothing but the present day history and history is nothing but the past day politics. Hence, they say that history and politics are not separate, history and politics are the same discipline. So they say that history is a root, and politics is the fruit. Politics is the fruit. This is what the analysis is. So they say that politics and history is not separate, but they are together. The famous proponent of this is Lasky famously said it. There is one person called Lasky. He said that every thinker is the child of his times. Every thinker is the child of its times. Child of his times. Hence, political theories get reflected in time. What does this mean? So, depending upon the situation, people will give their theories. As a result, it is the history that is going to determine the thinker or political theory rather than it is not the original work. Say, for example, if there is Machiavelli, he has written some concepts on political theory. Why he has written that concepts? He has written just to ensure that the state of affairs which was present by that point of time is going in a good direction. So every thinker is a child of his times. If Jawaharlal Nehru is thinking to have non-alignment movement, this is because at that time that is the need for the country. If Narendra Modi is thinking that NAM is irrelevant today, it is quite irrelevant because Cold War politics is not present now. Hence, every thinker is a child of his times. Whatever the time says, the thinkers will do accordingly. So, political theory gets reflected in time, or they say that political theory has its roots in history. That is what the context is. Not only this, according to Machiavelli, I said this Machiavelli is the person who made the subject to go towards history, right? According to Machiavelli, what he said is history is the best guide to understand politics. History is best guide to understand politics. And he said that the study of history has dominated political science for a long period of time. He has also said that international relations are nothing but study of diplomatic history. So this is what Machiavelli has given importance to the so-called historical approach. So Machiavelli is of the opinion that history is the best guide to understand politics. Because when I was explaining about Machiavelli, I clearly said that Machiavelli is the person who made the political science to come out of philosophy and to come out of the religion. And he said that morals and ethics doesn't have anything to do with political science. Rather, he said that it is the facts which are going to play a very crucial role in political science. And from where you can take these facts, look at the history and take facts. Hence, he said that history is the best guide to understand politics. And the history is playing a very dominant role for a very long period of time in relations. I'll come to that point. He has also said that the history, the history has been the determining factor of political science for a very long time. Whatever the history is there, they will look at the history and then they will go ahead with their political studies for a long. For example, this approach is true when it comes to India's relations with China. Try to understand this. China has waged a war. We have extended Panchashil doctrine with China and we have extended good neighborhood policy to China. But Chinese time and again they have proved that they are inconsistent or they are aggressive in its nature. Hence, we mold our political theory or we mold our political relations with China based on our history. Similarly with Pakistan. Right? Whenever we go for Pakistan, what history do we have with Pakistan? We extended friendly hand with Pakistan, but always Pakistan comes and attacks India. So, based on that, diplomatic history is the history that India has with other countries over a period of time. In the diplomacy, whether it is soft diplomacy which has worked, which is hard diplomacy which has worked. So, based on that, they frame international relations also. So, they say that history is not only determining the politics of a present state inside your country, but it is also determining factor of international relations. So the point that they are saying is, Machiavelli is saying is, history is the best guide to political science, whether that is internal or whether that is external. Next. Then there is one more person called Sabine. Lasky is one person, Machiavelli is one person, then there is one more person, Sabine, Sabine. Sabine. Guys, write these names, okay? Machiavelli, Lasky, Sabine. Now, Sabine is of the opinion that history serves three purposes. History serves three purposes. One is it gives the facts, it explains the facts, it gives the facts, it explains the facts, and it evaluates the facts. Which means already one thing is done, hence you will have facts before you, and it explains why that event has happened and it evaluates whether the stand that you have taken is correct or not. For example, if I am making a stand on farmers' laws, right, I had a history that if farmers' laws are not going to be proper, people are going to oppose it. That is the fact, and they explain why that fact is present. That is present because if you are not respecting farmers' laws, and tomorrow if you are making a law on the farmers' laws, you have to be very careful whenever you are framing that policy because the fact says that if you are going against the farmers' whims and fancies, they are going to revolt it. So Sabine says that history serves these three ways, and hence a good political theory can be made. This is what Sabine's concept is. Next, history approach is also quite popular because of one reason, because it is very simplistic in nature. Simpli- Simplistic in nature. Simplistic in nature. Just try to understand the history and then you'll understand the politics. It is very simple in nature. As a result, this has become very popular. Right? These are the benefits. One is what I said, what is historical approach? Studying political science with history lens. Or people say that politics is closely related with history because politics is nothing but history and history is nothing but past politics. History is the root, politics is the fruit. This is what they said. The major proponents are Lasky, Machiavelli, Sabine. Lasky famously said that every thinker is a child of his times. As a result, political thinkers think according to their time and political theories evolve as per the time. Which means political theories are nothing but the products of time and time is nothing but a product of history, right? And Machiavelli says that history is the best guide to understand politics, and history determines the major part of political science, not only in the domestic affairs but even in the international relations. If you want to understand international relations, try to understand the diplomatic history, then you are going to understand international relations. That is what Machiavelli's concept is. As far as Sabine is considered, he famously said that history can be explained, or history is very important to understand politics because it gives three ways. One is facts, it explains the facts, and it evaluates the facts. Given these three contexts, history becomes very important, and it is very important because it is simplistic in nature, right? Just by understanding the events, you can you can say which exactly is happening or what thing is happening. So this is how historical approach has gained traction over a period of time. The main proponents are Lasky, Sabine, Machiavelli, and then there is one more person called Dunning, Dunning. Dunning. There are four thinkers here. Remember that. In the philosophical approach, I said four persons: Plato, Leo Strauss, Clemens, Benio Zermino, Rawls. There are five persons there. Here there are four persons. Try to remember that four persons. Now, what is a criticism? Though this is very simplistic in nature, though it is giving facts, though it is giving evaluation factors, but there is still some criticism about this school. The criticism is, the first criticism that they say is, history is extremely vast. Extremely vast. Look at history, syllabus. Ancient history, medieval history, modern history, hence it is extremely vast. And all the events that has happened in the history may not be useful to understand politics. All the events that has happened in the history may not be useful for understanding the politics. 1 minute, I'll come back. So, one criticism of historical school is history is very vast. As a result, all the events which has happened in a history cannot be recorded and they cannot be useful in political science at all, right? So they have taken. It is very challenging to identify the relevant data from this vast data. So challenging to identify relevant data. Challenging to identify relevant data from that vast history. This is first thing. The second thing is history is written by some people who have some self-interest. History is always biased because they are written by people who have some self-interest. If you are right today studying about the Mughal history, you don't know exactly that thing has happened or not because you are interpreting history because of the books that were written by the people who were present at that point of time. As a result, history is written by self-interest people. They might not reflect the original social economic conditions of that point of time, right? Because it is not always scientific, rather it is self-interest, right? This is the second thing that is a major criticism of this school. Third thing, misunderstanding is, if you are going just by historical analysis, we become prisoners of history. We become prisoners of history. What do you mean by prisoners of history? Prisoners of history means always you'll be looking at history and deciding what to take the next step. If the next step is very unclear, say for example, if it is a new event like COVID-19, which the world has not at all seen, then history cannot answer your question, right? So don't become prisoners of history. Go with the present requirements of the time. So that is what they say. Next one is there is one person called Karl Popper, Karl Popper. Karl Popper. He has said that Hegel and Karl Marx has committed the guilt of historicism. Hegel and Karl Marx has committed the guilt of historicism. What is this historicism? They have excessively used history and they made political science irrelevant at all. So they said that these persons are responsible for the loss of discipline of political science and they have made political science to be going and they mixed political science with history. As a result, the discipline lost its original context. So they criticized that the decline in political science is because of Hegel and Karl Marx. Karl Popper famously said that the decline of political science is because of Hegel and Karl Marx because they committed the guilt of historicism. What is this historicism? Studying political science from history lens. Whenever you are studying political science from history lens, there is no need for separate discipline called political science. As a result, political science started declining in place of political science, history started gaining its traction. So they said this thing. Now, however, the subject has revived its relevance. The subject has revived its relevance post Thomas Hobbes, post Thomas Hobbes approach on contextual basis. Thomas Hobbes has given contextual basis to history, which means in order to understand history, look at the context and then you can understand the history. Say, for example, if Ukraine is waging a war on Russia or Russia is waging a war on Ukraine, look at the context why they are waging the war. Look at a similar context which was present in history. Then you can correlate the subject to a nearby extent. So they are saying don't look at the history overall past, just look at the context and then the subject can be revived. Hence, history is being revived today under the basis of contextual approach. Based on the context, choose the history and then interpolate it as per the requirements. In this way, they wanted to come out and they wanted to say that history is going to again play a very crucial role. Hence, because of this approach, history approach to political science is again becoming relevant or it has become relevant. This is what the second theme is. So, what is this historical approach? What is it? Who are the proponents? Why they proposed it? What is the simplicity in it? What is the criticisms? And what is the revival of the subject? Revival of the subject is by this person called Thomas Hobbes. That is, they are contextual in nature. As a result, they try to revive by making it in the contextual domain. So this is about historical approach. No need to remember this. They have not asked you the question, but they asked what is the traditional theories. You have to write these points. That is the only thing that this school is there. In the third school, you have legal approach or constitutional approach.